We are rolling.
Hi, I'm Kathy Lynch, and welcome to another edition of In Studio. Today with us we have Stephen Loring, director, writer, producer of the film The Age of Love. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you very much.
First, I just want to thank you so much for coming into our humble studio. And you have this
Absolutely.
amazing accomplishment, which I understand very well is a lot of work, making a documentary film. But before we talk about that, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So I was on your website and I was reading a little bit about you, and it turns out you did not go to undergraduate school or originally set out to be a filmmaker. So could you tell us a little bit about that evolution of career?
Oh, well, that's a long story. It's kind of been a whole journey for me, actually, that got me into filmmaking. I was an organic chemistry major in college, and I guess it's been one sort of a urge inside me that's taken me this far. Originally, I was looking to study the biochemistry of the brain. That was my goal, is to learn about how emotions are created inside our heads, how we relate to each other in terms of the chemistry. And I actually graduated and worked in the lab for a while, and then realized that I'd rather be out in the world and exploring and experimenting in society rather than just on my own. So I left and I actually went into acting for a while. I was in public relations. I was a screenwriter out in Hollywood. And little by little, I evolved into somebody who thought, well, I just want to be able to find stories that matter to me in the world about how we relate and connect to each other and tell them in my own way. So documentary filmmaking was my next step, and I went to film school, and this is my first feature-length effort.
Well, and thank you for it.
Thank you.
So The Age of Love is a documentary which explores emotional connection or our kind of human universal desire for emotional connection through the lens of seniors, citizens, correct?
Yes.
And the story comes out of the speed dating event. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, what I wanted to find out was, I guess the overarching question is, does love change over a lifetime? And if so, how does it change? The whole thing was really inspired by my own family. My dad had passed away, and my mom was nearing 70 years old and was alone in the world for the first time without an emotionally intimate partner, and struggling with that, really, in terms of having defined herself as a team. Her identity was wrapped up in being with another person for almost 50 years. So that same year, an uncle of mine who was in his late 70s and who'd never been on a date in his whole life, as far as we knew, met a woman, and they just fell madly in love. It was like
It's very sweet.
I know, it was teenagers again. It was the whole 9 yards too. I mean, they locked the bedroom door, and we really didn't know, what was happening.
And I don't
at
want
that
to know
point.
what happened at that point. But
So there was in my life all this stuff circulating around, all these issues of older people dealing with emotional issues in their life that just seemed to me wasn't really reflected in our media. I looked around and saw, if you're older, the stories were about, if they were about medical care, they're about Alzheimer's, or if they were about financial things, Social Security, reverse mortgages, digestive aids. It wasn't about growth. It wasn't about emotional growth and potential. And it just seemed like it was time to tell a story that would open up people's eyes to the fact that older people are growing, alive, interested in the same things that we're interested in, all of us, when we're, because we're human.
That's great. It reminds me a little bit of, I love what you said about connection, because for me personally, I feel like this medium of television should be about connection, or whether it's television or film, that's the kind of art that connects people emotionally to a subject material and becomes relevant in our lives, that we sort of transfer our experience onto whatever we're watching and vice versa, and that we gain a lot from experiencing what other people experience, even if it's through an empathic process. But a couple of years ago, we did a short video here with our seniors that Kim Jensen, who is the activities coordinator at the Council on Aging, who's actually sitting here with us, but we're not going to show her. She gathered some couples, and one of them agreed to be interviewed, and they were the longest standing married couple in the town of East Hampton.
Wow.
And it was just hilarious, because I interviewed them and I said, what does it take to succeed in marriage? And he went on and on about good communication and talking to each other. And at one point, she just went, all right, that's enough.
Right.
And stopped him from talking.
So they showed you exactly what they meant. Right.
And so I feel like I got that portrait, in that 2 minutes of footage that we put out. So it was great. But so we talked a little bit about what inspired you to make the film. What's it like to transition out of something like from chemistry or public relations or even acting into actually making, producing, writing, and directing? It's a different process.
It kind of combines all the other things into one. I mean, I came directly from screenwriting, so storytelling was the thing that I was most versed in at that point. And when you're making a documentary, I think storytelling has to be foremost on your mind, because you're just recording things that happen. A mentor of mine, Marshall Curry, who's a very well-known documentary filmmaker, told me once that in feature films, the director is God, and in documentaries, God is the director. And that is so true, because I went out and shot for this film 168 hours of footage to make a 78-minute film. But you have to just observe and listen, and I mean the skills that public relations teaches, the skills that screenwriting teaches, and then you take everything later and you try to craft a narrative out of it, because as human beings we want to find story. And the film I ended up with was kind of like random footage. It was conversations, it was little bits of people walking around, living their daily lives. But in the end, you want to feel like, what happens next and where are we going with this? And the speed dating event itself, that was kind of the hook into the film, because that gave it a narrative structure that I could hang all of the emotional things on. It made us wonder, like, what's going to happen? Who's going to find somebody? And then later on, as we went along the process, how will they react when they find out who they got? And then what does it look like to go out on a date a first date when you're in your late 70s? So the idea that speed dating is the hook of the film, it's what gives it its kind of overall structure, allowed me then to bore into the world of the hearts, the minds, the thoughts of people in that age group more. So I guess getting back to your original question, you take everything in life when you're a documentary filmmaker. You take all your experiences, because it's basically at this point about listening and relating to people, and then trying to see how life is evolving inside their story and how it connects to everybody else's story, and put it together. So,
well, it's fascinating. I was also hoping you would just talk a little bit about this model that you've created for distribution. So I should just mention too that this film is not available on Netflix. This film is not available, not yet, but it's not in a theater. You're actually doing the screenings. You're booking the screenings and then at individual places across the country. And then you also accompany and talk about it, which is it's a radically different model from commercial film production. So I was wondering if you could talk about that, because the only other film I've ever seen that sort of used a similar type of model was Bully, which is a recent film that came out, but that also was handled in a completely different way.
This is the era of new distribution models, the internet, the ability for everybody to pick up a camera and shoot. It's really the whole industry of how a film moves from director to the public is being redefined and continually being changed based on new technology that comes along and new demands in the market. I was open to really any kind of distribution for the film, and we did go to the festivals, and I did get offer to open it in theaters. But you know, when a distributor does that, they want the whole film. You're not able to say, well, I'll keep non-theatrical, you do theatrical. They want to make money off of it, so that you just basically give them the film and hope for the best. And this project, to me, seemed like it really had a life that was going to be more valuable than going into the multiplex, seeing it and walking out. It was going to be more valuable if it was used as a tool to really start conversation in the media, in the world, in communities. And I applied to an organization called the Fledgling Fund, which supports social issue documentaries in America. And each year they give a grant to about a dozen films that have a plan to kind of change the tone of the conversation about a key social issue. And my plan that I proposed to them was not just to screen the film, but to create community discussions around it, and then create a speed dating kit that any community could take based on the materials used in the filmed speed dating event, and then put on their own. So it would be an experiment to take a film and actually change people's lives with it somehow. When I do take the film around, it's so rewarding to me to stand in front of an audience. I mean, the filmmaker rarely gets to stand in front of an audience, and that's not a film festival audience or a media interview, and talk to people who go, I've never seen my voice, my experiences up on the screen before. And often the conversations go on longer than the film because it affects people emotionally that way. And everybody has a grandparent or a parent, even if they're not older themselves and dealing with issues of being alone. They're dealing with it in their families. So, you know, it really is rewarding, and it's really a great opportunity for me to do it. So I decided to release it this way for now. And next year, hopefully, if we're on national TV, and then we can release it more traditionally, so it filters into all the other communities.
It must be also a wonderful opportunity for you, who in your life's journey is sort of like seeking these patterns of connection, to go out into the world and kind of see how other people are relating to it. It's also extremely gratifying, I imagine, as a filmmaker, to constantly collect back that positive response to your work, which is a labor of love when you're making it. I mean, when you're making a film, especially a documentary, you have no idea what's going to happen next. You have no idea. You know, you may just go right back to buying a bulk pasta because that's what you can afford to eat, or whatever. And that must be an incredibly gratifying experience to not just get the reaction or the response from your artwork, but also that it's positive. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
No, it's absolutely true. As you know, I mentioned about distribution models. Typically, a film is given to a distributor, and that's it. It's the last you hear of it. It's the last money you'll ever see, typically.
If you even see the money from the distributor.
Right. You rarely do, because they, you know, the accounting is always very creative. And then you go back into a dark room, and it's true that making a film is you're out there in the world shooting, but probably 3/4 of it is sitting alone in front of footage, in front of a computer, and trying to figure out, like, is this going to work? How will people react to that? Does this tell the story? And then being out there is amazing to get the feedback. And what's even more amazing for this film is that I'm actually getting now pictures from speed dating events, and then notes about couples that have met and are now going out or living together because they saw the film, went to a speed dating event that we set up, and their lives have changed radically. There's no way to describe for a filmmaker how that feels to do something that has such an impact in people's real lives in the world. It's really unusual. So that's why I want to do this, because how many topics are there that would really give me that ability to go out and share it this way? There's no shortage of people getting older in America or in the world, certainly.
I'm one of them.
We're
both one of them.
Right.
So in this process of aging, which we're all experiencing right now, every day, has this project, making this project, presenting this project, changed your perceptions of love and the human experience? And how has it aided you in your own journey?
My own journey. Well, I came to the project with your typical set of stereotypes and assumptions about aging, just like everybody else. So I'm not immune from categorizing older people, the idea that, oh, they're falling in love and they're 80, isn't that cute? Kind of the infantilizing tendency that we have, the way we treat or talk about older people's emotions. And I guess one thing that really struck me, there's a moment in making a film when you know you're onto something, that it's a topic that's going to have some resonance. And that happened for me when I set out to get permission to film this. Because I thought, okay, here's a speed dating event, here's a topic I want to cover, here's a great venue and a way to cover it, a good hook and a way in. Now I have to get permission from 30 people who signed up for a speed dating event. It's a real speed dating event, they're real people. Nobody was told, if you sign up for this, you're going to be, your face is going to be up on screen across the world.
And I happen to know that some seniors don't want to be on television. We've experienced that here.
Well, that would be my assumption, right? So I was given the list by the organizers of the 30 people who had signed up, and I picked up the phone and I took a deep breath and I came up with this story. I said, well, I'm not looking to embarrass you. I'm not looking to exploit you. You're my guide into this world that I don't know much about. I'm an explorer, and you're going to take me into and early on in the process, one woman cut me off. And she said, look, hold on a second. She said, I'm 75 years old. My children love me. They take care of me. They send me cards. We go out to dinner. They do everything they should as good children. But even my own kids don't ask me what's in my heart anymore at this point in my life. It's like that's gone. That's invisible. She said, and I want to talk about it. Why wouldn't I want to talk about it? What do I have to lose at this point? And I listened and I thought, wow, if that's one by one, as I called the people, of the 30 people, 29 gave me permission not only to film, but said I could come over with a camera on the first call before I actually met them in person. And the other person said, come over, but don't bring the camera the first time. So all 30 people signed a release, and they said, use us, allow us to talk. And when the film was over, a lot of people came back to me and said, what are we going to do in our lives now that we're no longer like subjects of this film?
That's awesome.
Because we're important. For the first time in so long, we're important again.
Well, our seniors are important. I mean, the breadth and the depth of the experience of generations older than mine is amazing.
Well, that's the mindset. That's the theory. But in reality, aging is not respected in our culture. It's a youth-oriented culture. Everything is anti-aging, don't look your age, don't act your age. So to have a chance to appear, to be seen as who they really are and how they feel inside is empowering to them. And hopefully we'll get other people thinking. Teenagers who have seen the movie, we screened it at New York City High School last week, and people said, "Oh my God, I'm never going to look at my grandmother the same way again," and that's pretty cool. It's not
But
unusual,
I know that
right?
seniors are vibrant, and I know that seniors just contribute so much that it is sad that the social process is to sort of discount it. Like all of a sudden, oh, you're retired and you don't matter anymore. Now you've just got free time. Because I think that my generation, the generation after mine, we depend on seniors. Like this economic system and how it works, it was really dependent in a lot of ways on extended family and other mothers and other grandmothers, and the positive influences that I see raising children on them interacting with older generations is just so powerful and so meaningful and so deep.
And I think to follow up on that, there's a real need now more than ever to focus on that, because when I was a little kid, there was I had this game, I just remember this game called Life. The game of life is a board game. And you reach the end when you turn 65 and went to Golden Acres. That was like the game was over. And this is not our world anymore. In the last, 40 years maybe, it seems like a fourth generation has appeared that is healthy, and they're active, and they're out there, and they're not looking to wind down and have a few golden years on the golf course. They're looking for new growth, new potential. So how do we define the fourth generation in our country? We can't just take the stereotypes from our grandparents and the rocking chairs and apply it to that generation. We have to come up with a new way of looking at what that generation wants, is capable of, and needs. So it's not just respecting our elders, it's changing the way our society actually functions in terms of the fact that there are 90-year-olds out there who are looking to grow, and what we value.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think the valuing is really important, because you're not dismissed. Around here maybe it's a little bit different because we're all a little bit more liberal. It's kind of a liberal area. Mm-hmm. So I think that a lot of people in this area think about those things, especially people my age who are approaching their aging parents and trying to come up with plans for what to do in the future. And that's all that side of aging, which is very functional, is all necessary. But I think you're right. I think that you don't die until you die. There's this entire life. Like, you wake up every morning, you see the sunrise, you go for a walk.
For sure.
Life is, as a senior, is more than just about the next bingo session.
And why shouldn't it be, too?
Yeah.
Because my mother will tell me that sometimes she'll be walking down the street and the sun will be out, and she'll be thinking like, wow, there's so many things I want to do and to go see, and to I can go shopping or swimming. And she said suddenly she'll see a reflection in the window of a store she's walking by, and she'll think like, God, who is that old woman? And then it takes a second in her mind to go, wait, that's me. And there's a disconnect, because inside we don't age like the way our bodies do. We're still who we are. And society tells us, you're not who you are anymore, you're old, and so you've changed, you're beyond this, you're beyond that, you don't think about this, you don't think about that.
And we have those moments at our age where you think, right, shoulder bad, can't do that anymore. But in your mind, you're always sort of the pinnacle of your youth, which is 18. Mentally, emotionally, we mature, thankfully. But you're just sort of always, I do the same thing. I look in the mirror and I'm like, that's different than that picture, but oh well. So in making this film, was there a common barrier that you found that the participants experienced in getting together at this stage of life and opening up to that?
Well, there were barriers on several levels, I would say.
Release forms. Initially, right? But
well,
not so much.
that was to be in the film. The release, their own barrier. I mean, there's self-stereotyping for sure. We say that society stereotypes older people, younger people stereotype older people stereotype older people stereotype themselves. They buy into what they're told, I think. And even when my uncle was going out with this woman, he was 78, she was 80. They were living in it was a community, like a continuing care community. And there were people who wouldn't sit with them in the lunchroom, because that wasn't appropriate. That's not the way you behave when you're older. You don't hold hands, you don't touch each other. And older people today grew up with those stereotypes themselves, so they have taken possession of them. And when they see, for instance, my uncle and his girlfriend in their late 70s holding hands, being intimate with each other, they feel, I don't know, some people have said they're jealous, I don't know, and that they don't have it or they're not able to have it themselves. And some people just tell me that it's not appropriate at that age because that's the way society works. And you know, certainly that's a barrier, is the way that people look at themselves. But another barrier is that there's no opportunities out there. There's no bars to go to when you're 75 years old to meet somebody. You go to places where they have events, you don't know who's interested, who's available, who feels like they want to try to connect
Oddly
again.
enough, not like dating if you were 35.
Probably is the same thing. Well, there's less out there.
Except the bar thing, you can go
Right.
to bars, but.
There's less people out there at that age range, certainly. And I think a lot of older people now, certainly there's an explosion of people online at that. That's the biggest growth industry right now, is online dating for seniors, because people are looking for connection, and that's one way, without going out and having to, you know, find a social event, they can try to connect. And it sometimes works and sometimes it's scary. I mean, it's technological, which a lot of people, older people, aren't comfortable with. As one woman in the film says, online is great because you don't have to be yourself online. You know, that has its upsides and its downsides.
Eventually it has a downside.
A downside when you finally have to meet. So yeah, there's barriers in just the attitudes in general. People saying, again in the film, early on, there's a DJ on the radio who says, oh, there's a speed dating event for 70 and over. Isn't that cute? And there's that whole idea that we look at older people as not valid emotional beings anymore, that they're doing something that's adorable because it isn't real in the way that, you know, we're real when we're falling in love when we're 20 or 30 or 40. It's changed somehow. And it's just a weird stereotype, I think, that people need to be taken care of, that they're not agents of their own destiny as much anymore, just because of our history. So all of that stands in the way, and all of it, fortunately, is changing, and hopefully speed dating is not the single answer, but it certainly is creating awareness in communities that the need exists. There's nobody, we've had 40 communities across the country now that, in conjunction with the film, have organized speed dating events, and nobody who's attended one has come up afterwards and said anything but, can I do it again? So I think that shows.
I think I mean, speed dating, so if I were honest with myself, and I were single, I would think speed dating, not for me. But I think that also this like very urban concept of speed dating that's now being it has new applications, as you've documented, is interesting, because for seniors who may or may not be, you know, their mobility may be different than younger people, or they may be a little more sedentary in their geographic location. You know, it's a really amazing opportunity to all of a sudden, like, I'm going to meet 20 people tonight.
Right.
20 new people I'm going to meet tonight.
Who are all looking for something the way I am.
Just the concept of meeting 20 new people, and we're going to have this question, like you and I are doing right now. Go. That must be very interesting in a lot of ways, socially. Never mind the love thing. Socially, that must be very interesting, because you may meet someone like, well, I don't want to date you, but I'd like to have coffee and talk to you. And that there's lots of opportunities for emotional connection.
I think one aspect of this that was really wonderful to see is that when people came to a speed dating event, aside from their hopes and expectations of what was going to happen afterwards, they became, in many ways, young. I say young again, more of who they were. Their sense of being vulnerable, being open, being you know, thinking about who's going to like me, how will I appear from people to people, how will people appear to me? Will the guy who I like me back, or the woman who I like me back? It's almost as if you could see around the edges that the youthfulness of these older people hadn't died. It was dormant, but it still could come back. And they were so excited when they walked into that room and saw the table set up and the flowers set out, that they were part of something. It was almost like they were walking to the high school gym again, and with the opportunity to like meet somebody. And that in itself was empowering. One man at the end of the movie said, "I haven't met the love of my life yet, but I feel more aggressive now." He said, I never talked to women in the grocery store before, but I do now. He says, so each little step that you take to opening people up, to being socialized that way, whether they meet somebody or not, is of great value.
Well, and it keeps us connected. Keeping people connected to each other is such a huge part of life at whatever age you are.
For sure.
And you have inspired our community, East Hampton, to host its very first speed dating event on September 25th at the Council on Aging. So thank you for that. That'll be great. What message of inspiration or warning or caution or advice would you have for people going into filmmaking, for people making their films now, or for the younger filmmakers or older filmmakers, new filmmakers?
What cautions would I have?
Or inspirations, or what advice would you have for folks that are watching this right now, thinking about the films that they're making or want to make?
Well, first of all, I guess I would encourage, first of all, everybody to get a camera. The technology exists. You can go out, you can film your world. Use it as an opportunity to see the world in a more inclusive, wider way. One thing that we're taught in film school by the cinematography teacher is that filming is not so much about focus and zooming and panning and the technical stuff. It's oddly about listening, especially totally in the documentary field, maybe not so much in feature films. But if you're shooting a documentary, you want to be as involved in what the gestalt is, what the conversation is, as anybody who's in it. You don't have to keep going back and forth between people who are talking. You want to be able to get the reaction shot. You want to get the cutaways. You want to find out what the environment looks like. And you want to always be curious and try to find the visual element that doesn't necessarily just mirror the audio element, but gives more depth and meaning to it. So as a visual storyteller, your job is to be our eyes and our ears and find the details and follow the conversation. The goal being that when you make a film, you're going on a journey, and when you then edit and present the film to others, you want to take them on the same journey you went on, with the same hopes and excitement and expectations that you felt.
That's the art.
That's,
it's like,
if it
this
works,
is how I
it's
look at
amazing.
it.
That's the
This
art
is how
of
I
it.
look at the bird. This is how I look at this whole slice of life.
This is a world you haven't seen before,
Yes.
or heard before.
Through my eyes, or through your eyes.
And through your own experience of it too. So yeah, that's probably a good piece of advice, I think. I learned that in school.
Okay, and we're going to take a quick look at the trailer for your film, and so we're going to do that.
Let's go on the assumption that the Lord gives you 75 years. You're going to waste it? You know how that feels when you wake up and find out your partner's gone?
It's almost like you have nothing.
The intimacy of just having someone next to me in bed, I miss that a lot.
But the dream stayed on, to find somebody to share life with.
Did you hear what's going on at Mario's?
No, what?
It's a speed dating event for 70 to 90-year-olds only.
I think it's an awesome idea.
There's love out there for everyone.
To Grandma.
Speed dating is getting to know someone in a short period of time.
When the bell rings, we move to the next lady.
A brief interlude.
I can't believe there's people 70 and over that would do this.
Maybe I'll fall in love.
I'm 72. I'm dying to give my heart to somebody that I can have a love life with. I don't go to a bar and pick up a chick and bring her home and say, well, I want to do.
That's all I want, is someone to love me and I can love. Find me a hot, sexy guy.
I
told the group I was going to go speed dating, and they're all talking about, when do you go to bed with somebody? How many times do you go out before you ask them?
I consider myself romantic. Hopefully I can handle this.
I'm still that young girl, a teenager. I want my dream.
How old are you?
71.
Oh, you're a baby.
Right now I'm interested in the fracking issue.
I love Disney World.
I think Disney is phenomenal.
This past Saturday I jumped out of a plane.
Oh my gosh.
Hi, I'm old. How old are you?
I'm 70.
I figure you're about 72.
Time to move.
I just felt a spark. Got a twinkle in her eye.
There's a couple. One of them I'm looking for now.
My juices didn't run, dear.
We were all trying to sell ourselves.
Did I pass?
One of these girls could have been the love of my life.
This is the moment.
Oh my God.
I gotta make a phone call. Oh God, I haven't had a date in 50 years.
So what's next in your lineup as an artist and a filmmaker?
Well, as a human being, the whole project has been, I keep using the word journey, but it's true. It is a journey for me. I'm learning as I go, and like any good journey, you kind of follow the road in front of you. I kind of joke to people I'm going to be a geriatric social worker next, just because I'm so immersed in this field now, and showing it to people and hearing their feedback has given me such passion to spread the word. I have some ideas for new films. I love the filmmaking process, so maybe there's some way to combine the two, and we'll see what happens next. Not sure. That's
It's still
to
brewing.
be
It
still
can
to be
brew.
right, discovered.
And you know, it could brew for a while, and then you could completely change your mind and be focused on something else that is intriguing and explore that. So I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you
It's been
so much. It
wonderful.
was lovely to meet you, and I appreciate you, ripping around your schedule to fit us in.
Not a problem. Thank you
So
very much.
good luck at the screening, and I look forward to seeing the film. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm Kathy Lynch. This is In Studio. Thanks for watching.
Open your eyes, here comes a bigger part. And seek and define the answers are easy to read. Face that.
My parting words would be relax, have fun, and rest easy.
And aloha.
Aloha! Aloha! Thank you.